I'm bored. Let's do a wellness check on Jesterbell. All right, so I had a lot of people telling me to watch this video here. James Gunn's DC has already failed. And the reason why people were asking me to watch this video is because just 3 weeks ago, down here, she made a video going, why I will no longer support DC Comics with my money, no merch or comics. And although in this video, I don't think she explicitly says that she's not going to support DC at all, the impression in the video is that she's no longer going to be talking about DC. And if you look here, after this video, she doesn't really talk about DC at all. Keep in mind, there was a lot of drama around Peacemaker, and she's just ignored all of that. But here she has a video. James Gunn DC has already failed. Says Peacemaker, no viewership. Beaten by anime with Superman and hack over James Gunn's head. It's a 22-minute video. I'm going to try and keep it around an hour or less, but she can be long-winded, and she kind of she drives me off the deep end. So a lot of times my commentary goes a bit long on her videos. But let's see. Actually, let's go ahead and pitch it up. We're going to do 1.25. I'm a 1.25 person for most people. There are some people that talk a little fast. 1.25 is good for me.
Hello, everyone. Jesterbell, aka Female Frodo Baggins here. And today we're going to be talking about my least favorite topic of all to talk about on this channel, James Gunn's DCU. But just a little update on it, that I think that James Gunn's DCU has already failed.
I mean, it's already failed. One movie, one show, one cartoon. We've had one of each, but it's already failed. Based on what? What is your scientific, mathematical, crystal ball reason why?
I think that this is a non-starter, and that WB still will not have the MCU that they always want to have, and that I think
they don't want the MCU. He's already stated he's not trying to recreate the MCU. He's literally talked about that in many interviews. He wants it to be more like Star Wars. He wants it to be more like these independent projects that occasionally cross over. The reason why you're saying that now is, number one, it's buzzy to talk about the MCU. They're the king of the hill, so go after them, blah, blah, blah. But the other thing is that this particular set of things that have come out with Creature Commando, Superman, and Peacemaker have all sort of crossed over a little bit with each other. But there's going to be projects down the pipeline that are not going to cross over.
It's only a matter of time now before somebody, let's say Paramount buys WB, decides to give James Gunn the boot after seeing all of the numbers. And in fact,
remember I said crystal ball earlier? I haven't even watched this video, but I knew she was going to make a claim that required her to just predict something. It's the same with all these channels.
I think that DC as a brand in terms of its movies and TV right now is in a worse spot than it was before James Gunn came on.
By what standard? They had failed project after failed project after failed project. Peacemaker recently was doing ad campaigns in connection with, I believe, the NFL, averaging like 20 million viewers for those campaigns. I mean, why would they do that? Like, why would Warner Brothers, who doesn't have a ton of money, spend money to be involved in that level of advertising or be invited to be part of that level of advertising if it wasn't doing well, if it wasn't something that was recognizable? Peacemaker's viewership has been so good. They've talked about this, like everybody goes Nielsen ratings, or whatever. I don't care about that. And I don't even think we understand how that functions, because the numbers for streaming shows are not public. Most of the shows that I can think of don't release public numbers. So we have no idea. We don't know what the sign-up rate is, like people that are signing up for these streaming services. We don't know what that is for, the numbers for that. So yeah.
Now all of this is going to get the James Gunn fanboys very angry at me declaring this, but I don't care, because I've come to realize that it doesn't matter what James Gunn does or what fails in the new DC universe. They will never accept that there have ever been any mistakes along the way. But
actually, myself and many other people that watch Peacemaker and Superman have talked about problems with it. See, the difference is you see mistakes as being career ending. Like, everything is so hyperbolically bad that one mistake means this is it. It's the end of the world. Whereas I see mistakes as, okay, it's a stumble. Let's see where we go from here and see if he fixes it. And if he does it, then we'll talk about it more. Like we will jump back into whatever those problems were if they don't pan out, if they don't figure themselves out. But we don't live it like you guys live in the world of extremes. Everything is so extreme with you. Everything is like the biggest deal it can possibly be at any given moment. And I don't think like most people don't function that way. Like most regular people don't function that way.
Yeah, I am going to defend myself. Why would I come to the conclusion that James Gunn's DCU has already failed? And no matter what the media says about James Gunn and the success of Superman and DCU, why it's just DOA, right?
So so what she's saying here, let me translate this. Don't listen to anyone but her. Her opinion is based on absolutely no information. That's what she's saying. Don't listen to the media. Don't listen to anybody attached to the projects. Don't listen to other people that are enjoying it. Don't listen to anything. It's going to be DOA, and the only person that knows this is her. It's so weird. It's so fucking weird. Like, I would never preface any sort of opinion that I have as being based on literally no information. Like, I would never go, hey, I have an opinion about something, but I don't have any information to back it up. It's all feelings based. That's all. Okay. I mean, she might have some evidence. Let's see.
Right now, it's just dead. Well, let me explain. First of all, James Gunn was just the worst person to helm DC. That has always been my opinion. Now, I know I have some unpopular opinions where I'm not as big a fan of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies as other people are. The only one I really like is Guardians of the Galaxy 2. But yeah, I've never seen James Gunn to be the...
That's really weird. So this is interesting. And I can say this anecdotally. I just want to interject here on this. Most people I know say that that is their least favorite of the three movies because the third act and the first and the third act kind of battle with each other a little bit. But they really love one and they really enjoy three. But two is the one that most people say is uneven and not just, it's not well paced. It's not well put together like other James Gunn projects. So it's really weird to hear her say that. Anyway.
Brilliant mastermind when it comes to directing, like people think he is. His greatest successes were under Marvel. And since doing Guardians of the Galaxy, it's like that's all he knows how to do. And that's all that he brings to these DC movies. But anyway.
I mean, that's why he was hired by DC. See, this is the weird thing about these kinds of takes. He's doing exactly what he was hired for. If I hire someone who has been painting these pictures for another company and they did other stuff prior to that, but I hire them specifically because of their work with this one company, this one set of paintings they did. And I said, I want you to come in and bring that energy to my business. And they come in and they go, okay, we're going to do that. And they do that. Then he is doing exactly what he was hired for. So you're acting like it's a failure on his part because he is trying to sort of just reinvent that magic that he had previously in his projects for DC, when that's almost certainly why DC hired him in the first place. If you're saying that his other stuff wasn't popular and the things that made him popular were Marvel, then I think it takes just a second of thinking to go, well, that's why DC hired him. That's why he's there, because DC liked what they saw. So he's doing exactly what he was hired for.
James Gunn does those Guardians of the Galaxy movies, but he has a very abrasive personality behind the scenes, had some very awful...
So again, I don't give a fuck. I have to say this. I don't give a fuck about the personalities or any sort of personal stuff that goes on when it comes to things they say or things they do that might be off-putting to me. None of that matters to the projects that we're getting in DC. None of that matters. That's a weird, like parasocial connection to someone. She did this with Pedro, and now she's doing it with James Gunn too. You don't know them. You don't know him. You don't know Pedro. You don't know James. Why do you care about any little personality quirks he has? Shouldn't you be judging him based on the stuff that he's putting out there or the people that he hires to put in place, like their projects? Shouldn't that be what you're basing this on? If the universe is DOA, it's going to be DOA because of the products they put out, not because James Gunn has a slightly off-putting personality. What a weird way to look at this. It's really creepy.
Things that he said in the past, particularly these jokes towards little kids, and just a bad attitude in general towards people, as seen in other videos and stuff. And he had a bad attitude interacting with people.
So it's really strange. This community, when I say this community, I'm talking about the community that she is a part of, whether she wants to admit it or not. This community was the first ones to jump on the We Hate Marvel bus when they canceled James Gunn and fired him over all of those old jokes. And now that he's back as the head of DC, all of a sudden, all those older jokes are creepy and weird, and he shouldn't be working for DC. They can't even, there's no fidelity or standard when it comes to these guys. Pick a lane and drive in that lane. You're all over the road.
People, which is what wound up getting him canceled in the first place, because people were trying to get revenge on him after he was picking fights. But anyway, with all that, he eventually comes back to DC, you know, a new man, I guess. For a while there, doing Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and the Suicide Squad, he was acting a lot nicer and, you know, much more cordial with people, as he is constantly online and constantly interacting with people. But then, of course, we get to James Gunn as the CEO of DC, a guy who has never been in an executive position before.
Doesn't matter. Irrelevant. People who work up the ladder, like whether they're writers, actors, directors, whatever, at a certain point, they've been in the industry enough that the studio goes, hey, we're going to give them a shot to put them in this role. And by the way, he is the co-head. Peter Safran is the one dealing with all the business stuff. So all James has to do is deal with the creative. And he's very capable of being creative. We already know this. So her idea of like trying to say he's not qualified for this job is so fucking weird, considering what she does for a living here on YouTube.
And he is asked to do this job by a person who also was considering Todd Phillips, a guy who is not a fan of DC at all, who also has never been an executive, a guy who did Joker and Joker 2 to run the studio. So yeah, James Gunn eventually got the...
But he's not. James Gunn is. So that is irrelevant. What does this have to do with the DOA thing about the whole DCU failing? What does this what does Todd Phillips possibly getting hired have to do with that? Oh, nothing. Has nothing to do with it.
Gig with Peter Safran, but honestly, I never hear from Peter Safran. It seems like it's just
because Peter Safran is the business side. James Gunn is the creative in the face of the studio. That's why. But Peter Safran has done interviews. You can go through and read interviews where both of them have spoken to the press.
James Gunn's show. But let's do a review here of what James Gunn's time at DC has been like. Well, he started off by having to deal with 4 movies that were still slated to release in theaters and having to market them, all 4 movies, which by the way, James Gunn did have creative input on the final cut of those films. He's the person who allegedly added George Clooney Batman at the end of The Flash. And he said The Flash was the greatest superhero movie that he'd ever seen.
All right. So I just double checked that claim where she says that he had input on stuff like changing things in the movies. And looking through things like Games Radar, The Verge, different other articles that were written, there's no solid evidence that Gunn has been deeply involved in creative decisions. There's no evidence of that with the DCEU movies. It seems like he might have had some oversight in terms of where he wanted to go with the films, like what he was hoping to see after those movies came out. But it doesn't look like, from what I can see, I paused the video and looked through a few of these articles. I'm not seeing anything that shows that he did anything major other than gave a few notes here and there. But other than that, no major oversight. So this is something she's made up that she's not providing any evidence of. And she immediately jumps over to the Flash quote from him, which, by the way, a bunch of people involved with the studio said dumb shit about the Flash movie. He's not the only one.
Hilariously, that turned out not to be true, but his first year as DC head was 4 movies flopping at the box office, 4 movies that he couldn't save.
4 movies that he had almost nothing to do with. Not DCU. This video is James Gunn's DC has already failed. So what she's trying to do is, early in this video, right now around the 4-minute mark, she's trying to place blame of the failure of those films on James Gunn. She's trying to already kind of plant that seed. Ignore that. It doesn't mean anything. That has nothing to do with James Gunn. 0. His personality doesn't have anything to do with this. Those movies have nothing to do with this. Him not being qualified has nothing to do with. None of these things have anything to do with the claim she's making in the title of this video.
So yeah, that was that. But the excuse at the time was these were movies that he didn't greenlight. They just had to get him out of the way. Once James Gunn gets on board with everything, things will be a whole lot better, right? Well, they're not. Now, here's the thing. In order to make an interconnected universe, an interconnected franchise that everyone is enjoying and everyone is on board, and no matter what they say at WB, they still want that MCU level franchise.
So in other words, this is her. So she is creating this narrative. They've already stated that's not what they want. They want a more Star Wars style universe. They've said this on multiple occasions, and it's been backed up by multiple people associated with DC. So she's saying, I'm not going to believe any of that. I'm going to project onto them that they want the MCU. So that means any criticism she has now based on that standard it means nothing. It's irrelevant because that's not what they're doing. So let's see what her complaint is when she says, I'm going to treat this like the MCU, even though that's not what they're doing.
But James Gunn, his first call of what to do at DC was to create a show called Creature Commandos, a hard R-rated animated show about a team of misfits who teams up together and has to do a mission. You know, it's the same thing as Guardians of the Galaxy, and it was the same thing that he did with the Suicide Squad, and it's the same thing he's doing now. Now, Creature Commandos came out, and nobody watched it, really, and I wouldn't expect people to.
How do you know? Are you going to show your math? Let me double check something. All right, so the viewership numbers were not released in full, right? So we don't know the full numbers. But the first week on Max, Creature Commandos amassed 22 million minutes of viewing, according to Luminate. That made it the third most watched show on Max that week. And now the show's been renewed for a second season. So I'm not really sure what her proof is, but that's the numbers I'm getting. It doesn't seem like no one watched it. That seems to be hyperbolic. It also seems to be narrative driving, which is all she ever really does in these videos.
It's a hard R-rated show based on obscure DC characters, but James Gunn was saying that this was the first project in this new DC universe that he wanted everyone on board with. But, oh well, okay, so he did one project that was self-indulgent for himself and not really for anyone other than his niche of fans. Fine, fair enough. Let's go over to Superman, a movie that, I gotta tell you guys, whenever James Gunn comes out with a new project, and he's done this with Peacemaker, with the Suicide Squad, and with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, he does it with every one of his new projects. He always says it's his favorite thing that he's ever made. He didn't say that about Superman. In fact, he said that his favorite project in DC hadn't been announced yet. And so Superman is the one movie that he deflected away from calling.
What does this have to do with the quality of the movie? I'm still waiting for you to talk about quality. You lied about Creature Commandos. You lied about it. It got renewed for a second season, and the numbers for the first week looked really good. So I can't speak for the whole season, but for the information we have, what was provided to us, it paints a different story. So this narrative shit is so annoying.
His favorite project. Why? Because James Gunn, with a character like Superman, he is ill-fitted for that character. James Gunn is a person who likes obscure characters from comic books and edgy humor from 10 years ago.
So you just chastised him for doing that with Creature Commandos, right? You just chastised him for that. You said that's all he does. That's his style. That's what he does. He just rinses and repeats over again. But here, you're saying that he shouldn't do Superman because it's not his style and he should only be doing obscure stuff. Do you see how this works, guys? See how this works? So she attacks him for doing obscure characters with Creature Commandos and then immediately says he shouldn't be doing Superman because he should be doing stuff like Creature Commandos. It's crazy. Crazy world.
Superman, this hopeful character that is supposed to be innocent and is supposed to be appealing to everyone, is not a character for James Gunn. So James Gunn comes out with his Superman movie and he fills it up with another team of Guardians of the Galaxy as characters, and it still cannot escape his style of...
Didn't you just say that's what he should be doing anyway? So what's the problem? If he's playing to his strengths, then what's the problem? You just said that a second ago.
Humor, even though it was toned back for this movie. But Superman comes out and it's terrible. And the thing about it is that it's still got a great reception on Rotten Tomatoes. But if you act...
So everything you say about, like, this entire video so far, we're about 6 minutes into it, is ignore everything that exists in reality and just project whatever your narrative is. Ignore all of it. Everything you've said up until this point is subjective or ignoring reality. It's a combination of those two things. It's baffling that your audience still listens to you at this point.
Actually look beyond Rotten Tomatoes. If you actually look at the kinds of videos that regular people have made about the movie.
Right. So ignore critics, ignore fans, and only listen to the people who already hate James Gunn. Right? That's how you do it. You only listen to the people who are already set up to dislike something about whether or not something is good, because that's not biased at all. Look, I have no problem with people going, I don't want to read Rotten Tomatoes or I don't want to listen to critics because critics are too biased, in my opinion. I have no problem if that's your opinion. But then if you go, hey, don't listen to them, listen to these other group of biased people and listen to their opinion instead, because they're telling the truth. So you go from one bias to another and you're just like pointing people in that direction.
Then the movie didn't work for a whole lot of people out there. And that's the whole thing about James Gunn's Superman. I do not think it's a good movie.
Not every movie has to appeal to everyone. That's a really dumb way to make art. I want to make sure this appeals to every single person. Art by committee is garbage. It's garbage shit. Art by committee almost never works. I can't think of a time that I've watched something that was made by listening to every single voice in the room that came out and it was good. I don't remember that. So this is it's another dumb statement from somebody who doesn't understand art or media. I don't give a fuck what she does in terms of like making movies. She clearly doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about.
At all. In fact, I think it is the worst superhero movie that James Gunn has ever made.
Of course,
by far. I can say that the Guardians of the Galaxy movies are head and shoulders above this. You know, the cracks in James Gunn's craftsmanship, I would say, we're showing even more with Guardians of the Galaxy 3, where I think the only character that he gave an interesting arc to was Rocket. That was the only good part of that movie.
Rocket was the main character of the movie. He's already stated this in interviews. It was a movie about Rocket. Okay.
Everything else, it was just like he doesn't have anything more to do with characters like Star-Lord and the like, and Gamora's storyline went largely nowhere. So perhaps the cracks were showing in that movie, but there was enough there, you know, enough action and whatnot that I guess people liked it a lot better. But Superman is just down in the ground, 6 feet under compared to even that film. Superman is so terrible, like a barrage of TikTok videos being watched. Superman himself gets locked away in a cage for a majority of the film, so James Gunn can pal around with—
A majority of the film? You mean for like 10 minutes of the movie? He's in a cage? Okay.
The Justice Gang, because Superman is the last character that James Gunn wants to be working on. Not to mention, he completely assassinated the character of Jor-El and turned him into a totalitarian dictator who wants to conquer the earth with Superman and encourages him to make a harem for himself. A joke.
This has been done before. They've done that to Jor-El before. This is more tourist shit. This is tourist behavior. If you're such a huge fan of Superman, then you should know that there's been other media where Jor-El has not been this perfect father, this misunderstood father for Clark, for Kal-El. Like, you would know that. But you don't, because you're painting a narrative. Let's go.
That James Gunn thought was so funny, he said it 3 times in a row. James Gunn is perfectly proud of the fact that he assassinated Jor-El's character, though. And it was James Gunn.
Cry more. Like, literally cry more. Like, this is probably the first real criticism you've given to this movie specifically, or to James Gunn's DCU, the first real criticism you've given. And it's based on a narrative. Like, you're acting as if James Gunn is the first person to do this with Jor-El. It's crazy.
As confirmation, it was James Gunn who took a more naive, childish approach to Superman as a character who apparently is naive about how the world works and isn't even confident in himself. By the end, there was a behind-the-scenes reveal that I guess was supposed to make James Gunn look good about a disagreement that he had on set with David Corenswet. David Corenswet did not agree with how the final scene with Superman affirming what he believes and what he stands for and how he's human, really. David Corenswet did not agree with the approach because he said that the approach of it made it sound like Superman was still trying to convince himself of that.
Well, David Corenswet is not the writer and director of the movie. He's an actor doing a role for a writer and director. So it would be the equivalent of like you working as the boss in your store or your business, and somebody that works for you trying to tell you how to do things that they are not capable of doing themselves. Now, I'm not saying that David can't have criticism and feedback. He absolutely can. But at the end of the day, James Gunn's vision is what they were doing with that film. So I don't care about that. Again, that has nothing to do with the product that we saw that came out in theaters. Nothing. The only criticism you've given that we can even talk about and have an honest conversation about is the decision he made with Jor-El. And even then, you're being dishonest about it. We're almost, 9 minutes into this video, and you really haven't given any concrete reasons why you think that James Gunn's DC has already failed.
Rather than actually being convinced of that.
Am I just demonstrating? So if I say that's what it is to be human, that feels like I'm trying to prove it still, as opposed to I really know it.
And James Gunn completely denied all that and insisted they do it his way, which made it sound like Superman was still not confident in himself. James Gunn thought that having Superman not sound confident in himself was going to make him more human, but it actually doesn't complete the character arc in the movie. It's a shame because it seems that David Corenswet understands Superman more than James Gunn, but James Gunn is the word on everything in these.
The hate boner for James is really fucking strange. It's really strange. I'm not the biggest James Gunn fan. So this is not even me. Like, I'm not going to go to bat for everything James Gunn did. Go listen to my commentary about the last episode of Peacemaker. You can tell, like, I'm not going to bat for James Gunn on everything. But this is like a hate boner because it's so pedantically stupid that you're not even really addressing the issues with the film other than you didn't like it. If you're going to make a video where you're like, James Gunn's DC has already failed, I expect to hear some real criticisms about the projects that came out and what the problems were. You completely jumped through Creature Commandos. You didn't talk about any of the details of that show. You jumped into Superman and you've given like 1.5 criticisms about the movie that I think have any sort of talking point value to it. Everything else has been about James Gunn's personality, what he says off screen, how he carries himself, what he's done in the past. Can we just kind of like, it's a 22-minute video. Can we like tie it up a little bit, possibly?
Movies, it all has to be James Gunn, and he is in charge of every character, regardless if he's the right person for that character or not. And I think it's funny
because that's his job. That's what he was hired to do.
Because I think that this clip was released to make James Gunn look good as some sort of empathetic director who really gets these characters and really knows what he's doing, but it did not. But that's another thing about James Gunn, is he has to be involved with everything. David Corenswet and Rachel...
He is the head of the creative of the DCU. Of course, he is involved with everything. Keep in mind, if James Gunn didn't do something a certain way, like if something came out and it wasn't good, you'd be making a video saying James Gunn didn't do his job because he wasn't involved with it or he wasn't overseeing it correctly. This is why it's a narrative. I want you guys to understand that. This is what a narrative is. Say, for example, the movie came out and there were rumors that James Gunn wasn't on set, wasn't talking to the actors, wasn't doing all the things that he was doing that we've seen. She was making a video saying that James Gunn dropped the ball because he wasn't involved with it and he didn't care about the movie. He didn't care about the actors. He didn't want to hear what they had to say. He didn't interact with them. He wasn't on set doing stuff. Like, she would come up with another reason why. And the reason why we know this is because everything she's talked about so far outside of 2 tiny things has been about James Gunn's behavior outside of the finished product. So I know for a fact, that if James Gunn was negligent, she'd be making the same video, but then accusing him of not overseeing projects.
Brosnahan did a better job marketing this movie than James Gunn, and they seem to even have a better understanding of the characters, but every single interview, every single promotional had to be James Gunn. He needs to be the face of everything. Kevin Feige, for all his faults, can be behind the scenes working on all this stuff and only occasionally give an address to the press, but
because James Gunn was hired to come in and fix a broken brand. They are making the public aware that James Gunn, like, we see all of these things because this is what we do. We're part of the community online, so we see all of this stuff. You have to remind yourself of this. If you're someone who's on the internet and you're following this media every single day, yeah, you're going to see every single bit of promotion that comes out for something because that's what we do. That's what we're doing on social media. The general public does not. So they're making sure that James Gunn is seen as much as possible in the promotional stuff for Superman, so the public is aware that he is coming in and he is starting off a new DC universe. This was their idea. And it worked because Superman has been, contrary to what she's saying, you can go around and you can look all over the internet, Superman has been loved by a lot of people. It's not this dumpster fire that she keeps trying to paint. You don't have to like it, but the vast majority of people did have a positive experience watching Superman. And that's why they're fast tracking Man of Tomorrow. That's why they're already starting to promote some of these other projects. They're doing all this because Superman did so well. So whatever they did in their advertising worked for them. Now, whether or not James Gunn shows up in advertising for everything else moving forward, I don't know. I'm making the assumption that what they were trying to do here is make it very clear that James Gunn is in charge of the new DC universe and he's out there being visible and being part of that public promotion for Superman. That was my takeaway from it. But that would be the rational, logical, non-narrative, pedantic way of like looking at it.
James Gunn has to make himself the mascot, the face of everything DC, even though he doesn't get all of the characters. And even though with every interview he does about Batman, he seems absolutely clueless as to what to do with that character, saying that every Batman story has been told and Batman is the toughest character to crack, even though he's been the easiest. This is outright ridiculous. I don't want to see what a James Gunn Batman is going to look like. He said he doesn't want to make the character goofy, and I think the reason he's bringing that up is because that's the only thing he knows how to do. So how can he do it?
He's not going to be directing Batman. It's not his movie. I'm not sure if you understand that. James Gunn is not directing and writing everything that comes out from DC. He's not the only, this is not the Zack Snyder DCEU. This is, James Gunn is overseeing the projects. So I'm not really sure If you totally understand that, you're making it sound like James Gunn is the one making the Batman movie. He's not. You got the Matt Reeves, the Batman, and then you have this Brave and the Bold Batman thing that also is not going to be James Gunn's film. So
serious character. Why do we have James Gunn on this character when Matt Reeves is actually making projects that are more successful than James Gunn and better?
Because they're doing both. They're doing both. And you don't know what a James Gunn Batman movie would look like because it hasn't been made. So it's easy to make the argument that Matt Reeves is Batman is better when we already have a movie to look at. So you're basing your valuation on this on literally nothing but speculation.
Than James Gunn. But I went off on a tangent there for a minute there. I'm sorry. I got a little bit off track. Let's get back to James Gunn. So Superman comes out and it actually isn't good. It isn't good. And a lot of people agree with that. The whole thing around the
crazy world. A lot of people agree with that. You mean all of the echo chamber people here on YouTube that you follow don't agree with it? Shocker. They don't already like, they think James Gunn is bad already. So like the bar for him to do anything for them is so high that it's just almost impossible to reach. Shocker.
This movie is that it needed to be good for so many reasons. And so there's this weird defense around the movie. A defense is where I feel like some of that praise that it got from the Rotten Tomatoes critics doesn't even feel genuine because I feel like people needed this movie to be good.
And yours is genuine? Yours? And the people you suggested, these are genuine criticisms? That's fucking crazy. That's a fucking crazy take. But anyway, let's continue.
So badly, but the mental gymnastics went on about how the movie was doing great at the box office, even though it's not. We are still
the mental gymnastics. Like you're the one, your community are the ones who are trying to come up with every single excuse you can to make it look like it's a failure against all information provided in front of you. It's your community that's doing mental gymnastics. We don't have to do mental gymnastics. Everything we're saying is public information that can be looked up. Everything you're saying is, trust me, bro, everybody's lying to you. It's tinfoil hat shit.
In a day and age when movies can go $1 billion plus if people like this movie didn't even beat Man of Steel at the box office. And there has been so much.
It didn't have to. That was never the bar for this movie. So now the bar is beating Man of Steel. That's the bar. Or $1 billion. Man of Steel didn't make $1 billion. That one didn't make $1 billion. So what's the excuse for that? Why didn't Man of Steel make $1 billion? At that point, the Batman movies have made $1 billion. So why didn't Man of Steel? If that's the standard, let's rewind this. You talked about $1 billion, but then you say it didn't make more than Man of Steel. But Man of Steel didn't make $1 billion. So I just want you guys to peep this.
At the box office, even though it's not, we are still in a day and age when movies can go $1 billion plus if people like this movie didn't even beat Man of Steel at the box office. And there has been so much cope around it. It absolutely tanked international.
Let me ask you guys a question. Is Cope in the room with us right now? Is Cope in the room? It sounds to me like what you're doing is coping. That's what this video is. We're over 11 minutes into the video, and you've yet to give any like evidence or articles or numbers or anything substantial in support of your claims. You've not done any of that. Everything has been complaints about James Gunn's behavior off camera, everything he's done behind the scenes, which most of the general public doesn't know. So it's almost a non-issue, to be quite honest. You've argued against the critics that scored the movie higher. That feels disingenuous to you. You've argued against the fans that scored it high, because I guess you don't believe them either. You've argued against the studio, saying that it made enough money that they were happy with it. You've argued against it being a success because of your personal metrics, your personal numbers. $1 billion or Man of Steel, whichever one that is. If it would have beat Man of Steel, then you would have said it didn't make $1 billion. If it would have made $1 more than Man of Steel, you would have said, but it didn't reach $1 billion, or you would say adjusted for inflation or whatever. These are cope responses. This is what cope is. Coping is not saying every bit of information in front of us tells us these things. That's not cope. That's reality. That would be a reality response. What you're doing is you are coping and seething against James Gunn and the DCU, because every metric that you could look at, every tangible thing we can look at, tells us that it did well, that it did good, and the studio was happy with it. So you are the one, you and your community are the ones coping with the fact that it did well by creating a false reality for yourselves.
Nationally, a fact that Gunn blamed on the character being too American, even though he made sure that those elements were removed from the character. It just doesn't make any sense. And now, for the Superman box office failure to be complete, an anime movie beat it at the box office. An anime movie, spin off to a TV show, made more at the box office than a Superman movie.
This doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean, like, we could sit here all day and go, well, this movie beat this one, and this one beat that one, and this one beat this, Barbie beat that. We could do this all day. It doesn't mean anything. What kind of metric is that? Is there some sort of correlation to the target audience? Are fans of that specific anime also fans of Superman? Or is it two different groups of fans? Let's speak anecdotally here. I know a lot of people who like superheroes but don't like anime, and vice versa. So the crossover on that is probably a very small pool of people. So there is no actual comparison of those two projects. Like, if you want to compare Superman with Fantastic Four or even Man of Steel, at least then you're in the same ballpark. You're comparing it to something that has absolutely nothing to do with Superman. It's not even the same standards. That movie wasn't even in the same position as Superman was in terms of like coming off of a failed universe. It's a completely different thing. This is coping. This is what coping looks like.
Should tell you something, but in addition to that, the box office of this movie, like, they put it out on digital like barely a month after it released, and we're still trying to claim that it was a big success. The cope around it, though, was that, oh, they must have been so pleased about how this movie was doing at the box office, they decided that they had made enough money, so they took it out of theaters. What company does that? What?
That's not why. That is that. So now you're blaming what people are saying on the internet. You're saying that action speaks to the movie, but it doesn't. James Gunn already came out and said that he wanted to put the movie out on streaming prior to Peacemaker, or around the time that Peacemaker is released, so that people could watch that movie before they watch Peacemaker if they had a chance to see it. That's it. That's the reason they gave. And it would be a conspiracy theorist thing to go around and try and figure out why. You know what I mean? Like, we already know that there was an HD rip of the movie floating around the internet that people were already downloading and watching illegally. So logically, it makes sense that they would want to cash in on views before Peacemaker came out, so that people wouldn't go on the internet looking for Superman prior to Peacemaker and downloading it illegally when they could just buy it or rent it online. But you're switching over to what people on Reddit and Twitter are saying in terms of why they did it. Who gives a fuck?
Company would take a movie out of theaters because it was doing well and just decide, hey, we've made enough, we can go home. This is absurd. Warner Brothers is in debt. You don't think that they would want to make as much money as they could?
Yeah, they wanted to make money off of streaming, because right now it seems movies on streaming, by the standards of the studios, are bringing in between 50 and 100 million additional dollars onto films, which, by the way, we also know that the industry standard for how long they keep movies in theaters has become progressively less over time, because they want to get them out on streaming quicker. The only studio that doesn't do this is the outlier, that is Disney, which tends to keep movies in theaters around the 60-day mark. We've already covered this in another video. So them taking it out of theaters, whether it's doing good or bad, after a month and some change, is not really outside of the industry standard. It's really not.
To mention, it was also put on streaming very, very early. I guess testament to how well it was doing at the box office. But James Gunn's excuse for Superman and why it went on VOD so early was, it was because of Peacemaker. Yeah. Peacemaker, the hard R-rated show that was a part of the original DC universe that no one watched. And James Gunn tried to claim that it was very highly.
No one watched, even though you have no proof of that. No proof. What is proof? Does proof exist in our world? I don't think so. Keep in mind, you go back to the beginning of this video, she said that she was going to ignore everything else. So it doesn't really shock me that she's now providing no proof whatsoever.
Watched, but we had no actual evidence because HBO Max was not on Nielsen ratings yet. So James Gunn could claim whatever he wants. Now, did I mention?
And you could claim whatever you want. So it's a non-conversation. Like, there's no point in even bringing it up because we don't know the numbers, which is exactly what I said earlier.
That James Gunn has fibbed a lot in his time. Like, saying a lot isn't going far enough. He lies all the time about stuff that is happening. But Peacemaker, a character brought over to the new DC universe, a character that is a remnant and that's just holding on to the original DC universe, all because they are characters, including James Gunn's wife, who he wanted to keep around. And he even inserted into Superman as a way to keep them around because he really wanted people to watch Peacemaker. Peacemaker, a hard R-rated show.
Right. So the shocking thing here is that James Gunn wanted to use cross promotion so that people might possibly tune in to a show that he is working on in this new DC universe. Shocker. See, from a business perspective, I think it's best to just not cross promote. Don't cross promote. Don't even mention it. Don't even talk about it. Matter of fact, don't even make commercials for it. Don't put ads out for it. You know, don't even put it out on streaming. Make the show and then don't even release it. Now, yeah, I'm getting a bit hyperbolic there, but how stupid would it be to have a character that exists in the same world and not do a quick cross promotion for it in a movie that is a brand new universe? Why, like, how dumb would that be to not do that? Secondly, it doesn't matter if the show is R or the movie is PG or PG-13 or whatever. I've said this before. Do I have some criticisms about establishing important plot points in a rated R or a TVMA show, which is what it would be? Do I have an issue with that? Yes, I do have some criticisms about that. But just having them connect together in the same universe, I don't have a problem with that. There's no issue with that. Marvel's done it. If Marvel's done it, why is it a problem that James Gunn is doing it? Considering that you're saying they want to be the MCU, what's the issue? What's the problem?
Which opens up with a big orgy scene and has lines in later episodes where Lex Luthor, who appeared in the Superman movie, talking about whatever sexual act he's hearing in the cell behind him. It's very difficult to talk about this show on a channel without getting flagged or anything with what he's put into it. But it's like, James.
It's not. I've talked about it on streams. It's not a big deal, but it doesn't matter. You don't have to get graphic. You're just trying to set up a narrative.
Gunn is the same person he's always been with these humor. The reason why James Gunn got canceled in the first place, and I'm not saying that he should have been canceled or that he should have lost his job over this, but I'm saying the reason why he wound up in controversy was old tweets about, old tweets that were PDF-philia adjacent. A lot of these jokes, or not even adjacent, right into it. But, other things that people had found out about behind the scenes, like his list of top 10 most blankable female superheroes, a list that included Jubilee, a teenage character who
I want to point out that, and I'm not going to try and draw a comparison to like ages or anything, because I don't want to wrap her up in that. I think that would be an unfair statement. But you have talked about how you want sexiness back in shows and cartoons and things like that. Matter of fact, I did a video where you compared how sexy characters looked in Marvel Rivals versus how they look in live action. You have made videos like that. So I think there's a bit of hypocrisy if your issue with him is the fact that he talked about characters that are sexy or hot or whatever. And if you're talking about them being younger and whatnot in here, you would have to draw the line on whether or not you think that is something that he should have been canceled for. You personally, when I say that, I mean Jesterbell. You would have to draw that line. But you just said that you didn't. So if you don't think these are issues that he should be canceled for, then why are you talking about them? Why are you bringing them up as if they're a negative? I have issues with a lot of stuff that he did back in the day. I have issues with a lot of stuff that people did back in the day on Twitter. I've talked about this many, many, many times. But if your standard is he shouldn't have been canceled or fired for it, then your only reason for bringing it up is that you think it's offensive enough that he shouldn't be working for DC. I mean, essentially that's the same thing, right? It's the same argument, but you're acting like it's not the same argument. It literally is the same argument.
He acknowledged as a teenage character in his list, saying that I was told that James Gunn was gone, and that, yeah, that's in the past, and he's reformed now, and he's not like that anymore. Except for James Gunn is the same person that he's always been. He still has that style of humor.
No, that is crazy. So you are essentially calling him a PDF file. You're essentially saying that here. And you're saying that he is the same person because of his adult humor in Peacemaker? That's crazy, fam. That's crazy. If you're going to draw those parallels, you have to give some examples. You certainly have to give some examples. What is he doing now that correlates with him calling Jubilee hot back then? You have to draw a much clearer parallel for me. It's not mathing.
He's just careful about putting it in shows where it's appropriate, to make those kind of jokes given what the show is, and where he doesn't go far enough with it to get himself canceled. Like, it's still who he is now in these personality on social media, this very abrasive, condescending, mean personality where he is constantly responding.
Again, what does this have to do with the products? What does it have to do with the movies or the TV shows or the quality of anything? What does it have to do with that? Zero. Has nothing to do with that. I'm still waiting for you to provide some evidence to back up your claims that the DCU has already failed. I am still waiting for that. We are 14 minutes, almost 15 minutes into this video. I'm still waiting for you to provide some sort of evidence to back up your claims, because this I feel shit is not evidence.
Responding to people, sniping at fans just for having questions about why things are happening. That same personality that James Gunn once had is still here. It's in the stuff that he makes, the stuff that he chooses to make, the kind of jokes he chooses to tell, his taste, his show, Peacemaker, where he all of a sudden makes the character played by his wife hook up with every single character in the show while he's directing those scenes. If you want to think about why he's doing that, the same person.
Because she's an actor? Like, why is everything got to be some like fucking conspiracy theory tinfoil hat shit with you guys? So you think that he's doing this for some like fetish reason? That's why he's doing it? Y'all are weirdos. You really are fucking weirdos. All of you.
Who made those tweets originally, that same personality, it's still who he is now. It's just he toned it back a little bit after his initial cancellation. And this is the guy that they have as an executive of an entire...
Keep in mind, I want to bring this up. Jesterbell, she made a video with her sister where she called her hot over and over and over again. You were talking about how hot your sister was multiple times in a video. But now if James Gunn puts his wife in scenes with some other person where she's kissing or being romantic with them, all of a sudden that's a problem. But it's totally okay with you to joke about how hot your sister is. All right.
Studio, who is making himself the mascot of this studio and putting his face on everything, is still acting like this. And these are still the tastes of the guy that you put in charge of the entire DC universe. But Peacemaker, this big show that apparently he thought it was worth keeping some of the original DC universe for, just to keep these characters. Is anyone watching it? No, because as much as James Gunn lied in the past that this was a huge show, we now have evidence of it. We have Nielsen ratings, and Peacemaker.
Nielsen ratings are not, that's not the only metric. Okay, I need to just say this. There are other factors to successful movies and TV shows that have nothing to do with the Nielsen ratings. Has nothing to do with this. You guys always want to point to this and go, look at the Nielsen ratings. The Nielsen ratings are not the end all be all of success when it comes to shows on streaming services. They're just not. It doesn't work the way it used to. We're also talking about ancillary stuff, like how many people signed up in a certain block of time. Is there any merch tied to it? Are there any deals tied with other things? There are other factors that come into play on the success of a TV show and a movie. This is like the fucking worst surface level analysis of success you could possibly do. You might as well just look at a Rotten Tomatoes scoring going, look, Rotten Tomatoes said it was bad, so it must be bad. This is so dumb.
Has never charted on Nielsen ratings because no one is watching this show. And perhaps it's for the best that people aren't watching this show, because apparently the big thing, the big statement that James Gunn wanted to make for this show is that he makes his character Peacemaker go into a Nazi world that is run by Nazis, which apparently in James Gunn's view means a world where there's clean streets and only white people and
I told you guys, I told you that they were going to do this. She is saying, she is defending the Nazi world. Let's rewind this here. She is defending the Nazi world by saying, look, the streets are clean. Everything is nice. How bad could it possibly be? This is why I said he needs to do more, to show more, because these fucking idiots, these fascist apologists are going to take that and run with it. I'm so mad that he did that. So mad that he did that. But let's see what she has to say here.
Show is that he makes his character Peacemaker go into a Nazi world that is run by Nazis, which apparently in James Gunn's view means a world where there's clean streets and only white people and minorities are put in cages. Gunn, you know, as bad as it would be to put minorities in cages and whatnot, I think that a world run by Nazi Germany would still look a lot worse than this. Of course, James Gunn's excuse for not making it look worse is he didn't want to make the actors uncomfortable, which James Gunn is just full of it on anything that he...
I will not disagree that I think he should have done more, but the whole point was to show what people think the perfect Nazi world would look like, which was my entire argument in the first place when I've talked about this. I've talked about it extensively. I'm not going to get back into it here. There's several live streams and videos of me talking about this. However, he talked about it in the recap, and he mentioned that he checked with Danielle Brooks, who plays ads, to make sure she was comfortable with the major twist in the show. And when he discussed episode 7, there's commentary about the portrayal of Earth X in which non-white people are locked up in camps. But the claim that she's making about avoiding putting people in cages or anything like that Nothing like that is found anywhere in any of the scripts, the transcripts of interviews that I'm looking at here. Nowhere. So unless she's going to provide that and that source here, it means that he never said that. He never said that if you're not going to provide a source.
He says, but now there's been a million, villainous characters that have been made into Nazis over the decades, and that wouldn't be a problem. It would just be incredibly cliched of James Gunn to do this. But the problem is what James Gunn clearly...
Or timely. Timely is another word you could use. It makes sense, considering right now there's a lot of talk about fascism and authoritarianism. So timely would be a better thing. Cliche would be if he was doing something out of time, and that it's just something that people are talking about over and over and over again that has nothing to do with anything that's going on in the real world. But clearly there was some sort of like parallel to what's happening in society right now.
Wants to do with this is he's implicating that this Nazi world he's created where white people live in harmony but chase down black people to put them in cages is not too different from our own right now. Wow, James Gunn. Yeah, this world you created isn't too different from ours right now. Brilliant insight. But I feel...
Refute it then. Refute his claim. If you don't believe it, say something opposite of that. The allegories are that people who are marginalized get attacked, not necessarily physically, although it does happen. Trans people get attacked. Trans women specifically get attacked a lot. But people get attacked online for being marginalized. This world is just a more extreme version of that, in the sense that they have gone far enough as locking people up in cages. And if we get to the point a year from now where we're actually doing something similar to that, because you could even argue that what's happening with the defunct alligator Alcatraz and all of that is essentially what they're talking about here in Peacemaker. But if we get even further than that, we get to the point where they're actually locking people up in cages because of their status as human beings. You're going to look back at this video and go, wow, it wasn't so far from that, was it? It wasn't. But the allegory isn't necessarily exact like that. It's not literally that. But you have to have some sort of media comprehension, or you're being absolutely intellectually dishonest with your take on this.
But the guy just writes this stuff for Twitter and for Blue Sky and for Threads, because that's where he's on all the time. He's doing it so we can get a million retweets from people who are brain dead and affirm him. Yeah, this is eerily close to how it is living in America today. Just a brilliant insight, James Gunn.
So if you don't think that it is, then why are you so mad about it? Why are you so upset about it? If you're saying that that's not the way it is, and that all of this is just him writing fanfics for Twitter or whatever, then give me some sort of like refuting of that. Give me something that shows that what he's doing is not accurate. What is the takeaway from that for you that isn't literal? Like, can you explain? Because all you're doing now is repeating talking points of people on Twitter, people on Reddit, people on Threads. That's all you're doing.
But the problem isn't just that his political commentary is brain dead and that he doesn't know how to write. The problem is who he is implicating as who he thinks the Nazis are in real life. So I'm going to say that means that I think the only way he's getting away with this is that barely anyone is watching this show. Because if he's going to be that abrasive and confrontational with what is going to be a very large portion of his audience, then you cannot have a giant franchise. If these are...
I don't think he gives a fuck about Nazis who don't want to watch his shows. Right? I don't think he cares. If you are not a fascist, a Nazi, a bigot, then none of that commentary was about you. Right? It seems really painful for white people when we have to see that a big portion of our community, not all of them, but a big portion of it, is totally okay with white supremacy and fascism and oppression. That is something we should be dealing with in our own community. But instead, you have people like Jesterbells here, who's just like Augie in the episode, who's just comfortable in all of this. She's very comfortable knowing that all of these atrocities are going on, that marginalized people are getting attacked, that trans people are getting treated like shit, that black people get treated like shit, that people of color in general get treated like shit, that gay people get treated like shit, that anybody who's non-Christian, who's not straight or cisgender are treated like shit. She's comfortable in this because it doesn't affect her. And that was August's position. Augie, his Chris's dad on Earth X, is as long as it didn't affect him, he was just doing what he could with the cards he was dealt. She's totally comfortable with that. This is the fucking problem. This is the issue. These complacent, fence-sitting people who aren't directly impacted by any of the awful shit that's happening, but also don't feel the need to stand up for any of the awful shit that's happening. People like this with this mentality are the reason why fascists and Nazis and bigots and oppressors get away with it. Because if they would stop fence sitting and go, you know what? I'm okay with being a little bit uncomfortable for a moment in time to help people who are getting beat the fuck down by helping to stop this from happening so that episodes like this one would be unnecessary. But she's totally comfortable in not saying anything and just being a part of the status quo. Now, you can take away from that whatever you want. You can say maybe you believe that Jesterbell is benefiting from this in a bigger way. Maybe she even holds the same opinions as some of the people in the episode. I would say at the least, she's not doing anything about it. And to me, the end result is the same. And therefore, she is not just contributing to the problem, she is benefiting from what the problem is towards marginalized people. She is benefiting from that.
The people that you were going to vilify in your universe. But of course, apparently, according to James Gunn, if I'm acknowledging that this is polarizing messaging that he is leaning towards, then that makes me a racist, because he said in a recent interview that, completely unprompted, by the way, completely unprompted, someone was just congratulating him on Peacemaker for whatever reason, and he completely unprompted said, sure, there's some racists out there that have called me polarizing, but I don't care. Now, James Gunn, I'm sure if...
Only a hit dog hollers. I've said this many, many, many times. I have criticized James Gunn. I've criticized this story in particular. I've criticized the way he's handled it. He was not calling me a racist, right? He wasn't. Because I'm not out here criticizing the fact that he's talking about racism in his show. Because I think it is important to get it out there. I think it's an important topic. If you are someone that is doing that, he's essentially saying you either are a racist or you're okay with defending racist. It's one or the other. And that is a true statement, because that's not a criticism of what the show is doing. It is a criticism on what the presented ideology is in terms of the fascism on Earth X. That criticism goes into racism or defending racism when your issue is that only white people are being portrayed as oppressors in a white supremacy world. Of course they would be. If the allegory is that the Germans won World War II and that America assisted them, then yes, it would be white people. I'm sorry that history hurts your feelings. I'm sorry that you're upset and that you have to cope about that. But that's the reality of it. If that were to happen, these are the people that would be benefiting from that in that society. It's important to be honest about history and where things would end up. It's really important. People doing what she's doing, this is a problem.
These were actually racist you're talking about, they would call you a lot worse than polarizing. But okay then, my dude. But this is why I believe that the DC universe is in such a worse place than it was before, because everything is James Gunn. In the same way that Kevin Feige is now...
So we are, 17 minutes into the video? You've not provided any real evidence to back up your claim other than a Nielsen rating for Peacemaker. That's it. Everything else is ignore reality. Trust me, bro. Trust me, sis. Everyone else is lying, and she's the only one telling the truth.
Essentially the person in charge of what every Marvel movie is, and it doesn't really feel like it's director driven anymore. Every single project is going to be James Gunn. Like the Supergirl movie, it's directed by Craig Gillespie, a director I actually like. It's not going to be a Craig Gillespie movie. It's going to be a James Gunn project.
Based on nothing. She's again claims with no evidence. This should be a red flag. If you're watching me and you disagree with me, fair enough. But one thing you should definitely be skeptical about is claims with no evidence. If somebody is making a claim to prove that their argument is correct, that what they're saying is true, then they have to provide some sort of evidence. Trust me, bro, trust me, sis, is not evidence.
All of these things cater to James Gunn's taste. That is why we're getting punch-drunk Supergirl. I guess that's why we're getting a Clayface horror movie. Every single decision he has made, I guess, apart from being forced to do Superman, which is a decision that had to be made because that's what WB wanted, like everything is just what he wants. And everything is just catering to his niche fan base that is going to like whatever he does. That is entirely what James Gunn is all about here. But the problem is, as we see from box office...
Oh, haven't you argued to cater to the fan base? Isn't that like part of your position on all of this? Is that these people should be catering to the fans? But now because you don't like James Gunn and you don't like James Gunn fans, you don't think he should cater to his fans.
And from ratings for these shows is that it doesn't appeal to a lot of people. So if you have a guy who without the restrictions of Marvel cannot appeal to a lot of people, then how do you expect this DC universe to continue for long? And James Gunn has confirmed in interviews that WB has given him free reign to do whatever he wants with this stuff. He is not held back anymore. This is who he is on his own without much producer insight, putting any restrictions on him. And he is terrible on his own. He can't make good shows. He can't make good movies. And he doesn't even make...
Based on feelings, literally just feelings.
Them that are very appealing to a wide amount of people. He blames the international box office failure on the fact that Superman is too American. No, James, it's because your movies and projects are terrible and they're not appealing to a lot of people.
So the international audience is the only audience that didn't like Superman because it did really well domestic. But your response to that is a lot of people don't like it. Correlation, causation, do you have any proof of that? Do international people make blogs and say that they hated it for other reasons? Like, you're not providing anything. This is a 23-minute video. You can't even pull up anything but a Nielsen chart?
Let's not act like this movie did that well domestically either. So to me, it's only a matter of time now.
Hold on, let me check something. All right, so domestically it made over $354.2 million. It's the first DC film since The Batman in 2022 to cross 300 million domestically. And by August, it became the first DC film to cross 600 million globally. This year, it ranks number 3 in domestic 2025 grosses, right behind Minecraft Movie and Lilo and Stitch. What else do we have here? It beat Man of Steel's opening weekend with 125 over 116. It's the second highest opening for a Superman featured film. Only Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice had a bigger opening. The first DC film since Batman to gross over 3. I already read that one. It entered the top 10 highest global grossers of 2025. So it's in the top 10 of that. So I don't really know what you mean by this. Like, I'm providing literal information that I can look at that can be researched. You're providing nothing.
I know Supergirl isn't going to get much at the box office. Punch Drunk Supergirl, James Gunn Supergirl.
Again, crystal ball predictions. It doesn't mean anything. No proof. No, nothing. All right.
I know that Clayface won't either. I guess he's got his Superman sequel that he's confirmed is not a Superman sequel because he could not care less about that character. It's only a matter of time because despite all of the gaslighting on how well this stuff is actually doing.
I find it really funny that you claim he doesn't care about the character at all, but you're also saying that they're lying about the success of the movie. It's like conflicting shit. Does he not care about the character, or do they care so much that they're hyping up the numbers and falsifying information? Which one of those things is true?
Sooner or later, someone is going to come along. Like, let's say it's Paramount. If they buy WB, they're going to look at the numbers and be like, oh, this guy isn't actually that successful with this stuff, and he'll get the boot. And I guess maybe he's just soaking up as much money as he can get as an executive as he can now. But it's unfortunate because the reason why I criticize all this stuff is I always thought DC has a lot of potential and it could make really great stuff. And the Superman movie and all of that, it's not.
This is the plea she does in every video. This emotional plea. I care so much. I love these things so much. It means so much to me. Blah, 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 etc., etc. Nobody really gives a fuck about what you think, Jesterbell. You are literally a mouthpiece for people's confirmation biases. You are an echo chamber. You're the wall of an echo chamber for your viewers. That's it. Nobody really cares how much you actually care about this or how passionate you are about these things. This is my crystal ball moment, okay? I'm going to guess they would say no. They don't really care. This little plea, this emotional plea at the end is so stupid.
Living up to its true potential. But unfortunately, the next era of DC after Zack Snyder, after the Limbo days, like even in the Limbo days post Zack Snyder, it was more likely you would get a good movie because they let so many different people make their own choices. And it was like no one had the reign. So it meant you might occasionally get something good off of the DCU pre-James.
You're still going to get Elseworld movies. That's why Matt Reeves' The Batman is coming out. But you're completely not even mentioning that. You're not even talking about that. We're going to get other movies that aren't James Gunn DCU movies. Why are you ignoring this?
Gunn, but now it's all going to be James Gunn, and he is not a good executive and not a good writer. So it's only a matter of time before either a project fails enough and he's gone, which it will, or a producer, an executive above James Gunn finally looks over and says, hey, you're not actually doing that well. We don't need you here anymore. But until that happens, there is going to be nothing for me from the DC universe, and there's going to be nothing for most people because James Gunn and his terrible projects are made very specifically for a certain niche, his own niche of James Gunn.
All right, we're going to stop it there. I don't need to listen to her like meander on about all this. I will say it's really weird for somebody who has pretty much walked away from DC to give a fuck about anything DC. You made that whole video where you were talking about you're walking away from DC, you're letting it all go. I find it really strange that you're out here giving a shit about DC movies and cartoons, but you don't care about anything else DC. That doesn't seem like a fan to me, really. Like if you're this diehard fan, I would think you'd want all of it to be better. You'd be fighting for all of it to be better. But see, this is where you kind of tell on yourself. You're only talking about this because it's popular to talk about in the moment. And so you're doing exactly what I'm saying you're doing, which is you are confirming biases, you're screaming into the echo chamber with everybody else, and you're just an additional mouthpiece on the anti-James Gunn train that is making money for people on social media right now. That's it. That's all this is. This parasocial, like giving a fuck about what he does off camera and how he acts in interviews and what he might have said to this actor, what he might have said to the actor. It's all performative bullshit. It's all performative. None of that matters to the casual audience that's going to these movies. They don't care. And he got hired to do exactly what he was doing at Marvel in DC, which is what he's doing. So if you have an issue with that, then you would have an issue with everything he did at Marvel, because that's what he's bringing over to DC. But you don't. You've said that you enjoyed at least one of his movies. Oddly enough, the one that most people don't like, which is Guardians 2. So this seems to me like it's all just performative nonsense. The video is titled James Gunn's DCU or DC has failed already, right? That's what the video is. You've given no proof of that. None whatsoever. Let's recap it very quickly. Creature Commandos did really well on its first week of release. We have no other numbers besides that, but it got renewed for a second season, which tells me the studio was happy with it and they greenlit it to go on. Superman, we've already talked about the numbers for Superman, how well it did, the reasons why it ended up on streaming, all the positive buzz and energy around it, the fan reception, things like that. The fact it didn't make $1 billion means nothing. The fact that it didn't meet Man of Steel means nothing. Doesn't mean anything. You failed to mention that it did better than Man of Steel on its opening weekend, which I find kind of weird. Then you're mad about Peacemaker because it's tackling racism, and you don't like the fact that it has some adult humor in it, I guess, and that it didn't chart on Nielsen, which also doesn't mean anything. None of the stuff, none of the evidence that you provided backs up your claim. Your claim that it's failed already is purely based on trust me, bro, trust me, sis energy. There's nothing else there. Again, every time I go back to your channel, I don't understand why people still watch your content other than to get that dopamine of confirmation bias. That's it. You are so scummy. You're such a liar. Like everything you do is so underhanded and so calculated. This is why you write scripts. This is why you do it. You even tried to place the blame on James Gunn that 4 previous DCEU projects failed. That's scumbag behavior. It literally is.